Hello and welcome back to Gas Buteo, one of the episodes in the Pitchside scenery build. And as you can see from, what you can see on the screen there is we have advanced on slightly in that the trees I ordered off eBay from China have arrived. I ordered 2 lots of trees. You'll see some taller ones that are in there and some that were massively out of scale, so I haven't used them. So I'm going to stick with these ones because when you furl them out, because they come all crushed up, when you start, in fact I'll show you what I mean by that. So they're like wire basically, so you can unfurl them and, you know, rather than being all compressed, they sort of spread out and look reasonably good. So we're done with trees now. All the trees are in. I'm going to move the camera so you can see what I've done. So down here we've left the gap for playing. That's where the goal would normally be. And then over here we've got a few more trees and I've put a few round the pitch as well. Right, now you will see it looks a bit white there. What that is PVA glue, but we will come on to that in a moment. Firstly, let's chat about the resin and what went wrong. So I'm going to move the camera down so we can see it. Let's get in nice and close. Now, if you recall, on one of the last videos, I mixed up some resin and we ran it down that river and it formed a little stream, so you can see where it went down there. I'm trying to hold on to this camera because I've got a feeling it's going to tip over. Hang on a minute. Let me just put one of the legs on. That's a bit better. Right, can you all see? Good. So we ran the resin down here and it was very effective at this end. What the resin does is where it's being pulled downhill, on the edges of the water where it touches the rock, it sort of pulls down so you get a nice flat edge. It looks, you know, a lot like water and it dries solid and, you know, clear, and the edges look good. Now down the bottom, more down here where this white stuff is, which we will get to in a moment. Let me just move that camera around. As the resin is drying and pooling down here, the edges become curled. And I'll show an example of that in a minute. So it looks a bit less realistic. And what I had to do was do a second level of resin on top, which I mixed some white paint in. I'm going to move the camera again so you can see. A lot of moving about today, I'm afraid. So I don't know, let's try and focus in on that bit. There's a bit of white paint mixed in here. So there's 2 layers of resin there. The one that had a little tinge of blue in, and the top layer, it was a tinge of blue with some white, normal, not resin. It wasn't resin dye. It was normal paint that I put in there, and that sort of flexed up a bit. It reacted a little bit with the resin, but that was on purpose. I knew it was going to do that because it puts a lot of little dots in there, so it looks like bubbles and whatnot. So that's worked quite well. But like I said, down the bottom, when it's starting to dry out and it's pooling down, you get this rounded effect on the edge. And this is where this white has come in now. So what I've done to counteract that is mixed up some PVA glue, 50-50, with water, and I've poured it in, and the PVA glue will dry really flat. So as you can see, it's running. Whoops, sorry, I'm shaking the camera there. Trying to stop it falling over. Anyway, as you can see, the PVA glue is running down the edge, and that will dry a much thinner, less rounded sort of edge into the river. Also, because it's down here and it's meant to be a river, more of a river than a stream, I'm hoping it will give it a bit of a sort of bubbly look, you know, a bit more realistic. So that should dry clear as well, so it will all look nice and clear when it's all gone off. Now let's move on to this part. I did say I was going to tell you what went wrong. So if we look down here, in fact what I'm going to do, move the camera around here, let's see what the resin looks like. Now this will be a bit jiggly because it's in my hand. You can see there 2 layers of resin on there and the whitish layer on top, and then on top of that is a PVA glue layer. Remember I told you that resin is not your friend and it will leak out somewhere if it can. Well, it did. It pooled down here. If I put the camera back, and it started leaking around the side of me rocks. Let me show you some in here. Here's a little piece of resin I snapped off. So this grey block here is actually resin, and that was connected to it. So it started pooling down there, and by the time it got to here, it was really becoming, you know, quite viscous and solid. And so it was still moving, but it was very rounded. Now, I waited sort of about 12 hours, and then I was able to snap that bit off. So that snapped off because it was, you know, generally heading towards the pitch. That left a bit here that was still leaking around. This is this grey thing. Now, you can't panic with resin. Don't panic, we'll sort it out. So all I've done is waited for it all to go off, and then I've glued some of them little rocks on there that we had, the little Hornby rocks, and I've painted it in the same grey that I painted the rocks there. So it's actually, I'm using where the resin's leaked out to my advantage, and that now makes a bit of a rocky outcrop. I'll cover it with some of the grass, put some bushes on it. You won't be able to tell. You'll think it's rocks, when in fact it is actually the water. It's the resin. So that's what we've done with that. Right. So that did go a bit wrong. Let's have a look at the trees. You got the new trees up there. They're looking quite, I like them, to be honest. They're quite impressive. The other trees were too big and round, so I don't know if I got the wrong scale. So the ones I've got that I've not used would have been about this high. These ones, although they're much bigger than these little shrubby trees, I think they look well. It's sort of a nice mixed sort of forest look. You should always plant in odd numbers, otherwise it looks too ordered. So there is 7 trees in that section. I got one there that was really squashed, so I've put it growing the flat side against the rocks. That looks quite effective. If you remember as well, at the top end here, there was a big hole, and I poured resin in it, and the resin basically disappeared inside this rock mass. Well, when I poured the second lot of resin in, it did partially block up, but still some resin disappeared in there. So this whole thing must have resin in it somewhere. So what I've done there is also, and I'll move the camera again, a lot of moving. As you can see, I've filled it with PVA, which will go off. And I might have to do a couple of layers there, but that should dry clear as well. Right, so what else do we need to talk about now? I think that's quite a lot of the stuff we've done. We've left a playing gap, as said. We're waiting for that PVA to dry. I've got a bit of back down here, bit of gluing grass and whatnot on just to tidy up some of the edges. But generally, let me just put that steady. I think we're almost done with it, to be honest. But what we got to ask ourselves is, what scale is it? Because, you know, I've been happily building away. So let's get an actual Subbuteo figure and see what he looks like in the landscape. Now I have in here, excuse the rattling behind you, a Heavyweight Rovers fan, Heavyweight Reference 12 from back in the day. So there he is, just to show the scale of it against the river. That's what he looks like. And let's have a look what he looks like over here. If I focus on that, so you get a nice view of it. Let's get the old Subbuteo man up there. Where should we put him? Stood in the trees. There he is. So that gives you a good idea of the scale of the trees and the rocks and everything. And overall, I think we're looking all right, to be honest. So we're nearly done with it, so that's good. So I think the very last video of this one, we will have a scan through when it's completely finished and all dried. I'll just pass the camera on rather than me witter on, I think. And then that'll be the end of that. So that'll be our pitchside scenery. Very, very near to completion. Quite pleased with it. If you just tuned in and watched this video and perhaps a bit confused about what we're doing, the idea of this was really born out of seeing some of the scenery built by Keith Littler on Table Football Monthly. He did a lot of town scenes around his, but it sort of sparked an idea that I wanted something on this strip of land. I didn't want to spend the earth doing it, so a lot of this stuff, if you look through the older videos, anyone that's watched all the videos will be able to tell you that this is, apart from the trees and the decorations, all this stuff I've picked up out of bits and pieces out the shed. And if you go in your shed, you know, don't be put off by having to go at things. if you look at the start of these videos, it really is a bunch of old scrap stuff cobbled together. And, you know, even though it's cost, most of it's cost nothing, it's coming along all right. But that's really been the whole ethos of Gasbuteo Stadium since the start. I want to show that you don't have to spend the earth building a Subbuteo Stadium, or in fact anything for whatever you're into. A lot of it is just a matter of experimenting and trying new things and seeing what works really. If it doesn't work, you just do it again, you know. It doesn't make any great odds. And this is what we've made virtually out of nothing really. It's just odds and sods all knocked together. So there's nothing special here. And when it's all finished, I will do that scan through video and you can see how it looks when it's completed. But that's where we're at in a minute. Very close to completion indeed. Anyway, until next time, up the gas.